Okay, today on the bench for repair we have a disassembled 1950s Nomura ZOOMER robot. And this robot is a battery operated robot that runs on a single C-cell battery. Goes through the chest. See this little battery hatch and goes in. And it was sent to me because it said when they put the battery in, turn on the lights up inside the head would come on, but the motor wouldn't run. And rather than putting it back together and possibly breaking off more tabs, they just sent it to me in the disassembled state, which is good. The motor itself doesn't have any openings to get into the brushes, and whenever possible you want to avoid bending the little tabs that hold the fiberboard brushes in place, because they almost always break off on these really old toys. So in this case, you can see it has this little metal plate right here. It's in there to keep the motor from moving, just locking it in place. So you can undo that little tab right there and lift. Actually, I took this whole side off out of the way, but since I've just soldered the wire back onto the switch right there, see, this forms a switch. The battery positive touches that shiny contact in the middle. When you rotate this knob, this piece of metal right here, this knob basically is the end of the positive battery, comes up and hits that little button, and that little button is then crimped. That little button actually is aluminum, which is crimped onto this copper or brass piece here that the wire solders onto and goes up to the motor. One side of the motor is ground, the other side's positive. This is switching positive. Okay, let's get back to where we were. So the motor wasn't running, and there's normally when a toy this old has a motor that's running, it's because the brushes are fouled up and dirty, grease buildup from not running for many years. Like I say, you can't really spray cleaner in there because there weren't any little openings. Most motors will have a little hole opening somewhere, usually on the opposite side of the fiber that you can get into. So in this case, I took this side off since the tabs are already undone anyway, then removed this little plate which keeps the motor from rocking. Then I could make a small opening into this metal shell through which I could then spray the contact cleaner, and by working the motor gear by hand, twisting the end of the shaft, get it going and continue to spray it, and then lube up the motor bearings on both ends, and got it running again. So now we're getting ready to put it back together, and I thought before I put it all back together, you might just want to take a peek in there. Now, the battery is going to sit in this holder like that. The switch is already in the on position, so this orange wire becomes your ground. And there's the leg motion. You can see the light is on. I mean, they're asking a lot from a single C-cell battery, especially back in the 1950s when the C-cell batteries would have been just carbon batteries, nothing special at all. So that's what you've got going on there. And this half is going to go on. You've got tabs on the bottom. And some tabs on the front. I'm going to have to solder that wire on. It's an added ground wire. You know, some of the ones from back in the day didn't have that wire, and so they kind of would work intermittently because they were depending upon the negative side of the battery to touch here. This is crimped to this piece of painted metal, and this piece of painted metal slots into the body, which is painted. But they were hoping that the voltage would make it through all those painted surfaces, and if it reaches the body, then eventually it's going to reach the frame, and if it reaches the frame, it's going to eventually reach the motor, and yada yada yada. Actually, it would work when the toys were brand new, but then the older they get and the more corrosion that happens on all the metal surfaces, the less well it works. Now the original wire, ground wire that was on here, Trying to get it. It was very old and non-flexible. So I did replace it because this hatch has to open and close a lot. And let's just see before we go any further. Okay. So that's going to work. And see, there is one broken tab on the back of the head here. That's not really going to be a problem because the head is held together quite tightly by a spring mechanism. Let's just see how that works out. It's got an antenna on top of his head, like so. Okay, that's holding that. I'm not bending any tabs yet because I want to make sure. Now these two will take. Trying to pick up the little piece so you can see it. One of these little joining pieces. See, and then once you get that on there, then the two tabs will bend. And depending on how many times they've been bent in the past, they may or may not break. Now I haven't bent them all the way because I just want that little tab piece to stay there while we continue fitting and looking. Got a tab place here. So apparently somebody in the past must have opened this toy up because it only came with these two little tab pieces, and yet we saw one on the back of the head that was already broken off. So a repair attempt has been made in the past. Okay, at least now we know it can't fall apart. When I get ready to put the mask on, I'll have to take this antenna off because the mask goes on first. And before the mask goes on, you've got this little piece that goes in there, a gel. All right, well let's just continue on. Any of you that get bored at this point, you know where the click the next button or the stop button or whatever you like. But if you're enjoying this, well then let's continue to stumble on. You see how that gel is going to fit in there, and that works for the eyes and the mouth. Now there are a couple of holes. I'm trying not to let that gel fall out of place. Unfortunately, I kind of have to hold this thing out of frame of the camera to do that. Okay, so we got that on. Now we can put the antenna for the ears back on. And I can't do this on camera. So just hang in here. There we go. So you can see it had to poke through this face mask piece and into the head. Fits the notch up on top. Does the same on this side. Now these tabs are for holding earpieces on. That tab is already missing. There's really nothing that's going to hold that ear on at this point. So I think at this point what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the video because I'm going to have to fabricate a new tab and probably use that little spot welder that I've done videos on in the past and spot weld the new tab in place and then put it the rest of the way together. It's one of the reasons why I didn't bend any tabs permanently yet. But let's just assume that that had been fine. You can see how this earpiece would fit over the tabs, and if that tab was there, it would go over that one, then you would bend them. Actually, you want to make sure you put it on the right way. It's a little cutout for that antenna shaft, see? So you do that with both ears, and then there's a nice cosmetic piece for the front chest, which fits on there. And it's... okay. I almost made a mistake anyway. Where I put that little holding round piece, that's supposed to be for here, so I'll spot weld a new tab on back here too. Those two actually come through and are slotted to tab onto this piece. So I will stop this video and then do a final video when it's all back together correctly, showing how it turned out. And I just thought some of you might enjoy seeing what's inside one of these old vintage battery operated Zoomers. They made up wind-up versions too. It was a very successful line, and lots of different colors. If you get into collecting these, you can find that there are lots to collect. And it has a ratchet in the feet. They seem to be only in the rear, and they seem to be working, so he should walk. Well, I think we should be able to test that, even at this stage of the game here. Okay. I'm going to work on that too and see if there's something that we can do to improve that. There may not be. I mean, just based on his age, he was moonwalking instead of making progress. Even though the ratchets were working, or maybe they're just not gripping on the surface. We'll find out. Stay tuned for the final demo video and we'll see how it turns out.